I caught my mom reading my private diary. But when I confronted her, she pulled out a second diary one where she had been writing about me for years. Hi everyone. Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. I always wrote at night. There was something about the stillness after midnight, when the house settled into its creaking silence and everyone else had surrendered to sleep, that made the words flow easier. The lamp on my nightstand cast a warm circle of light across my desk. And in that small, illuminated world, I could be completely honest. My diary wasn't anything fancy. Just a leather-bound notebook I'd bought at a bookstore downtown 3 years ago, when I was 15. The cover had worn soft from constant handling. The edges slightly rounded, the leather developing a patina from the oils of my fingers. Inside, the pages smelled faintly of ink and paper, that particular scent that made me feel safe somehow. Like the smell of old libraries or my grandfather's study before he died. I kept it in the bottom drawer of my desk, buried under old school assignments and printed articles I'd never read. Not exactly Fort Knox, but in our house, we'd always had an unspoken rule about privacy. Mom never went through my things. Dad never asked questions about where I was going or who I was with. We trusted each other, or at least I thought we did. My relationship with Mom had always been complicated. Not bad exactly, but layered with unspoken expectations and silent disappointments. She was a high school English teacher, which meant she analyzed everything. Every conversation, every gesture, every word choice. Growing up with someone who professionally dissected meaning made me careful about what I said out loud. Maybe that's why the diary became so important. On those pages, I didn't have to measure my words or anticipate how they'd be interpreted. Mom and I looked alike. Same dark hair, same narrow shoulders, same habit of biting our lower lip when concentrating. But where she was controlled and measured, I was messy and impulsive. She planned meals a week in advance. I forgot to eat lunch. She color-coded her bookshelves. My room looked like a hurricane had passed through. She spoke in complete, grammatically perfect sentences. I trailed off mid-thought. "You're so much like your father," she'd say sometimes, and I could never tell if it was a compliment or a criticism. Dad was an engineer, practical and logical, and he died when I was 12. A car accident on a rainy Tuesday morning. After that, it was just Mom and me in our too-quiet house, navigating around the empty spaces he'd left behind. The diary became my refuge after Dad died. At first, I wrote to him long letters about my day. Questions I wished I could ask, memories I was afraid of forgetting. Eventually, the entries evolved into something else. I wrote about school, about my friends, about the girl in my chemistry class whose laugh made my chest feel tight. I wrote about the panic attacks that started junior year, the way my hands would shake before tests, the nights I couldn't sleep because my mind wouldn't stop spiraling. I wrote about Mom, about the distance between us that felt like an ocean sometimes, about how I loved her and resented her in equal measure. I wrote about everything I couldn't say out loud. On the night of October 15th, I stayed up late working on a college application essay. The deadline was approaching, and I was stuck on the prompt about overcoming adversity. How do you write about your father's death without sounding melodramatic? How do you explain that the hardest part wasn't the loss itself, but watching your mother transform into someone smaller, more brittle, more afraid? I finally gave up around 2 a.m. and pulled out my diary instead. The words came easier there, without the pressure of college admissions officers judging every sentence. I don't know how to write about Dad without making it sound like I'm asking for pity, I wrote. But the truth is, losing him changed everything. Mom used to laugh more. She used to be spontaneous. Now she's so careful, so controlled, like she's afraid that if she lets go even a little bit, everything will fall apart. And maybe she's right. Maybe we're both just holding on by our fingernails, pretending we're fine. Sometimes I wonder if she knows how much I'm struggling. The anxiety, the insomnia, the way I feel like I'm drowning most days. But I can't tell her because she has enough to worry about. She works so hard, and I see how tired she is. I can't add to that burden. I miss Dad. I miss who we used to be before. I closed the diary and tucked it back in its hiding place, then finally crawled into bed. Sleep came fitfully, punctuated by strange dreams I couldn't quite remember in the morning. The next day was a Saturday. Mom had papers to grade, so she'd claimed the dining room table, spreading student essays across its surface like a paper landscape. I could hear her humming something classical Debussy, maybe as I made coffee in the kitchen. "Morning," I said, pouring a second cup for her. "Morning, sweetheart." "Thank you." She took the coffee without looking up, her red pen already moving across the student's essay. "What are your plans today?" "Library. I need to work on that college essay." "The one about adversity?" "Yeah." She glanced up then, her dark eyes studying my face. "You could write about your father." "I know, I don't know how to do it right." "There's no right way, honey. Just honest." I nodded and escaped to my room to gather my things. That's when I realized I'd left my phone charger in Mom's room the night before. She'd let me use her outlet when mine stopped working. Her bedroom door was ajar. I knocked anyway. Habit, but there was no answer. She was still downstairs, absorbed in grading. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Mom's room always smelled like lavender and old books. Her bed was made with military precision, pillows arranged just so. Her dresser was organized with almost obsessive neatness jewelry box aligned perfectly with the edge, a small dish for her watch and rings, a framed photo of her and Dad on their wedding day. I spotted my charger on her nightstand and crossed the room to retrieve it. That's when I saw it. My diary. It was lying on her bed, partially hidden under one of her decorative pillows, but I would have recognized that worn leather cover anywhere. My heart stopped. For a moment, I just stood there, staring, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. Then the anger hit like a physical force. I grabbed the diary and held it against my chest, my hands shaking. How long had she had it? How much had she read? When had she taken it from my room? I heard her footsteps on the stairs and something inside me snapped. I strode out of her room and met her in the hallway. "What the hell is this?" I held up the diary, my voice coming out louder than I'd intended. Mom froze, her face going pale. "Sweetheart, I can explain. You went through my room. You took my diary. You read it." Each sentence was its own accusation, sharp as broken glass. "Please, just let me." "How could you?" My voice cracked. "That was private. That was mine. How could you do this to me?" "I was worried about you." Her voice was quiet but steady. "You've been so withdrawn lately, and I found it last night when I was putting away your laundry. I shouldn't have opened it. I know that. But once you started reading, you should have stopped. You should have respected my privacy." God, Mom, do you have any idea how violated I feel right now? "I know, and I'm so sorry, but..." "Sorry? Sorry?" I was shouting now, years of carefully controlled emotions erupting all at once. "You read my most private thoughts. You invaded the one space I had that was completely mine. What you did was a betrayal. It was wrong." Mom's eyes were shining with tears, but her jaw was set in that stubborn way I knew so well. "You wrote about panic attacks, about feeling like you're drowning, about not being able to sleep. Did you really expect me to just close the diary and pretend I didn't read that?" "Yes, that's exactly what you should have done. Those were my private thoughts, not an invitation for you to..." I broke off, too angry to continue. "You're my daughter. When I think you might be hurting, when I think you might need help, I needed privacy. I needed one place where I could be honest without worrying about how it would affect you or what you would think. And you took that away from me." Mom's face crumpled slightly, but then she seemed to gather herself. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand and said, "Wait here. Please, just wait." She disappeared into her room, and I stood in the hallway clutching my diary, my whole body trembling with rage and shame and hurt. Part of me wanted to leave, to walk out the front door and just keep walking. But something kept me rooted to the spot. Mom emerged a moment later carrying something. Another notebook, older and more worn than mine, with a faded blue cover. "Before you hate me completely," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I need to show you something." She held out the notebook to me. I stared at it, confused. "What is this?" "It's my diary, or one of them. I've kept them since you were born. One for each year." She swallowed hard. "If you're going to be angry with me for reading your private thoughts, then it's only fair that you read mine." I took the notebook slowly, like it might burn me. The cover was soft with age, the pages yellowed slightly at the edges. I opened it at random. March 14th. Emma is 6 months old today. She smiled at me this morning. A real smile, not gas. And I started crying. Daniel asked me what was wrong, and I couldn't explain it. How do you explain that you're crying because you're so happy it hurts? Because you're so terrified of failing her? I look at this tiny person, and I'm overwhelmed by how much I love her and how much responsibility that love carries. What if I'm not enough? What if I make mistakes that damage her? What if she grows up and hates me? I looked up at Mom, my anger momentarily forgotten. "You kept a diary about me?" "About us. About being a mother. About watching you grow up." She sat down on the edge of her bed, suddenly looking exhausted. "I started it the day you were born, and I've never stopped. I have 18 of them now. One for each year of your life." I sank down onto the floor, my back against the hallway wall, and kept reading. June 3rd. Emma's first day of kindergarten. She was so brave, walking into that classroom without looking back. I cried the entire drive home. Daniel says I'm being ridiculous, but I can't help it. She's growing up so fast, and every milestone feels like a small death, the death of who she was before. I'm proud and devastated all at once. October 19th. Emma told me today that she wants to be an astronaut. She's 7 years old, and she's so certain, so full of dreams. I remember being that age and wanting to be a writer. My mother told me to be practical, to choose something stable. I promised myself I would never do that to my daughter. I will support every dream, no matter how impossible it seems. April 2nd. She's growing so independent. My little girl, she doesn't need me to read bedtime stories anymore. She reads to herself. She doesn't want me to walk her to school, she goes with her friends. I know this is healthy. I know this is what's supposed to happen. So why does it feel like losing her? I turn pages, my hands shaking for different reasons now. The entries were detailed and intimate, full of observations I'd never known she was making. September 11th. Emma is 12 today. It's been 3 months since we lost Daniel. She's trying so hard to be strong for me, and it's breaking my heart. I see her watching me with these careful eyes, measuring her words, her emotions. She's become so small, so careful. I want to tell her that she doesn't have to take care of me, that I'm supposed to be the strong one, but I'm failing at that. I'm failing at everything. My throat tightened. I remembered that time, but I'd never known she could see what I was doing. November 28th. I'm worried about Emma. She's so quiet lately, so withdrawn. She spends all her time in her room, and when I ask her how she's doing, she says she's fine, but I know she's not. I can see it in her eyes. She's carrying something heavy, and she won't let me help. I don't know how to reach her anymore. The distance between us feels insurmountable. January 7th. I found myself standing outside Emma's door tonight, just listening. I could hear her crying, very quietly, trying to muffle the sound with her pillow. Every instinct told me to go in, to hold her. But I didn't. I'm ashamed to admit I was afraid. Afraid she would push me away. Afraid I would say the wrong thing. Afraid of my own inadequacy as a mother. So I stood there like a coward and listened to my daughter cry alone. Tears were streaming down my face now. I looked up at Mom, who was crying too. "Why didn't you come in?" I whispered. "Because I was afraid," she said simply. "Because I was so paralyzed by the fear of making things worse that I did nothing at all. Because I'm a flawed, imperfect person who makes mistakes." I turned more pages. March 23rd. Emma got into a fight at school today. Verbally, not physically, thank God. When the principal called, my first emotion was panic. My second was pride. She was defending a kid who was being bullied. She stood up when no one else would. She has Daniel's sense of justice, his refusal to be a bystander. I'm so proud of her, even though I had to ground her. June 15th. She's 16 now. I watch her sometimes when she doesn't know I'm looking, and I'm awed by who she's becoming. She's so much stronger than I was at her age. So much braver. But I also see the anxiety in her, the way she second-guesses herself, the way she carries the weight of the world on her shoulders. I recognize that. I do the same thing. I wish I could tell her that it's okay to not be perfect. But how can I when I can't accept that for myself? September 30th. I think Emma might be gay, or bisexual, or questioning. I saw the way she looked at that girl at the coffee shop yesterday. I want her to know that I love her no matter what, that she's safe with me. But I don't know how to start that conversation without seeming like I'm prying. So I wait. And I hope that when she's ready to tell me, she will trust me enough to do so. I stared at that entry for a long moment. She'd known. All this time she'd known, and she'd never pushed, never demanded answers. She'd just waited. October 14th. I did something unforgivable today. I read Emma's diary. I found it when I was putting away laundry, and I opened it, and I read it, and I couldn't stop. I know it was wrong. I know I betrayed her trust. But I read about her panic attacks, about her insomnia, about how much she's struggling, and now I don't know what to do. Do I tell her I read it? Do I pretend I didn't and try to help her anyway? How do I balance being her mother with respecting her autonomy? I'm so scared for her. I'm so scared I'm failing her. That was yesterday's entry, the last one in the diary. I closed the notebook carefully and looked at my mother. She was still sitting on the edge of her bed, tears running down her face, waiting. "You've been writing about me my whole life," I said. "Yes." "Every day?" "Almost every day. Sometimes I miss a few when life gets too busy, but I always come back to it." "Why?" She was quiet for a moment, considering. "Because I never want to forget. Because being your mother is the most important thing I'll ever do, and I wanted to document it. Because someday maybe you'll be a parent, and you'll understand how terrifying and beautiful and impossible it all feels. Because I needed somewhere to be honest about my fears and failures without burdening you with them." I understood that. God, I understood that completely. "You wrote about being afraid of failing me," I said. "Constantly." I wrote the same thing, about being afraid of burdening you. Mom made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. We're both idiots, aren't we? Pretty much. We sat in silence for a moment. The two diaries between us like a bridge over the distance we'd been carefully maintaining for years. "I'm still angry," I said finally. "What you did was wrong. You invaded my privacy." "I know, I'm not trying to excuse it. I'm just trying to explain. I wrote things in there that were private, things I wasn't ready to share. I know, and I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry." She wiped at her face. "But I'm not sorry that I know now. I'm not sorry that I know you're struggling, that you're having panic attacks, that you're not sleeping, because now I can help." What if I didn't want help? Then I would have respected that, but I would have at least asked, given you the option. She looked at me directly, her eyes red but steady. "Can I ask now? Can I ask if you want help?" I thought about it. About carrying everything alone, about the weight of pretending to be fine, about all the nights I'd lain awake wondering if things would ever get better. "Maybe," I said. "I don't know. Therapy, I guess." if you think it would help. I think it might. And maybe we could try being more honest with each other. Both of us. I looked down at her diary, still in my hands. Can I read more of these? All of them, if you want. They're as much yours as they are mine. They're about us. Will you promise to never read mine again without asking? Yes, I promise. And I'm sorry I broke that trust. Okay. I took a shaky breath. Okay. We sat there for a while longer, neither of us quite ready to move. The anger was still there, simmering under the surface, but it was mixed now with something else. Understanding, maybe. Or at least the beginning of it. The entry about Dad, I said. The one where you wrote about his sense of justice. I'm writing my college essay about him. About how he taught me to stand up for what's right. Mom smiled through her tears. He did, didn't he? He was so good at that. Yeah, he was. You're like him in so many ways, but you're also like me. Stubborn, overthinking, carrying too much alone. Lucky me, I said, and was surprised when she laughed. Lucky us, maybe. We're a disaster, but we're a disaster together. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff from sitting on the floor. I held out her diary. I want to read the rest. All of them. But not right now. Right now, I need some time to process all of this. Of course. She took the diary back. Take all the time you need. I started to leave, then turned back. Mom? Yes? Thank you for showing me. Your diaries, I mean. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. It was only fair. I nodded and went back to my room, closing the door behind me. I sat on my bed, my own diary still clutched in my hands, and thought about everything I'd read. All this time, I'd thought she didn't understand, that she didn't see me struggling. But she'd seen everything. She'd just been too afraid to reach out, afraid of pushing me away. Just like I'd been too afraid to reach out to her, afraid of being a burden. We'd been circling each other for years, both trying to protect the other, both ending up alone. I opened my diary to a fresh page and started writing. Today, Mom read my diary, and I caught her. I was so angry, so hurt, so betrayed. But then she showed me something I never expected. She's been keeping diaries about me since I was born. 18 years of observations, fears, hopes, and love. Reading her entries was like looking in a mirror. We're so alike, her and me. Both overthinking everything, both afraid of failing each other, both carrying so much alone. I'm still processing how I feel about all of this. I'm still angry that she invaded my privacy. But I'm also, I don't know, moved, touched, overwhelmed. She's been documenting our relationship this whole time, trying to be a good mother, terrified of failing, just like I've been terrified of being a burden. Maybe we can figure this out. Maybe we can learn to be honest with each other, to trust each other with our fears instead of hiding them away. Maybe it's not too late for us. I closed the diary and looked at the clock. It was almost noon. Downstairs, I could hear Mom moving around in the kitchen, probably starting lunch. For a moment, I considered staying in my room, taking more time to sort through my emotions. But then I thought about all those entries I'd read, about her standing outside my door, listening to me cry, too afraid to come in, about all the times we'd both chosen silence over honesty because we were trying to protect each other. I stood up and went downstairs. Mom was at the stove, stirring something in a pot. She looked up when I entered, her expression carefully neutral, like she was afraid of pushing too hard. "I'm making soup," she said. "Your grandmother's recipe." "The one with the carrots and barley?" "That's the one." I leaned against the counter, watching her cook. "In one of your entries, you wrote about being afraid I would push you away if you tried to talk to me about difficult things." She stopped stirring. "Yes. I was afraid of the same thing. Afraid you'd think I was weak, or broken, or too much to handle. You could never be too much for me. I know that now. Or I'm starting to. I took a breath. I want to try. Being more honest, I mean. It's going to be hard and I'm going to mess up. And sometimes I'm still going to want to keep things to myself. That's okay. We'll figure it out as we go. She set down the spoon and turned to face me fully. I meant what I said earlier about therapy. I think it could help. And maybe I could use some therapy too. We could both work on this. Together? Together. Separately. However you're comfortable. I thought about it. About everything I'd been carrying, everything I'd written in my diary that I'd never said out loud. About the panic attacks and the insomnia and the constant anxiety. About how exhausting it was to pretend to be fine all the time. Okay, I said. Let's try it. Mom's face crumpled with relief, and suddenly we were hugging, both of us crying, clinging to each other in the middle of the kitchen with the soup starting to boil over on the stove. I'm sorry, she whispered into my hair. I'm so sorry I read your diary. I'm sorry I invaded your privacy. I know, and I forgive you. Eventually. I'm still mad, but I forgive you. She laughed wetly. That's fair. We pulled apart, and Mom turned back to rescue the soup while I grabbed bowls from the cabinet. We moved around the kitchen in comfortable silence, the kind we'd perfected over years of living together. But it felt different now. Less like we were avoiding each other and more like we were just being. Over lunch, I told her about the college essay I was struggling with, and she offered suggestions without trying to take over. I told her about the girl in my chemistry class, tentatively, ready to retreat if she reacted badly. She just smiled and asked questions and made it clear that she loved me exactly as I was. It wasn't perfect. We didn't suddenly become one of those mother-daughter pairs who share everything and finish each other's sentences. But it was a beginning. That night, I wrote in my diary again. I think we're going to be okay, Mom and me. It won't be easy and there will be setbacks. But I think we're finally starting to understand each other. Or at least we're trying. She told me at dinner that she's going to keep writing in her diaries, and I said that was okay, as long as mine stays private. She agreed. She also said that when I'm older, if I want to, I can read all of hers. All 18 years of them. Part of me is curious. Part of me is terrified of what I'll find. But mostly I'm grateful. Because even though what she did was wrong, it opened up a conversation we should have had years ago. It forced us to be honest in a way we never have been before. Tomorrow we're calling therapists. Mom found a practice that has sliding scale fees, and they specialize in anxiety and grief. I'm nervous, but also relieved. Maybe someone can help me figure out how to manage the panic attacks, how to sleep through the night, how to stop feeling like I'm drowning. And maybe Mom and I can figure out how to be better at this, at being family, at being honest, at trusting each other with the hard stuff. Maybe it's not too late for either of us. I closed the diary and put it back in its hiding place. Then I reconsidered and moved it to my bookshelf instead. Right out in the open. A small act of trust. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom, even though she was just down the hall. Thank you for giving me another chance. I love you more than words can say. I typed back, love you too, even when you're infuriating. Her response came immediately. The feeling is mutual. I smiled and set my phone aside, then climbed into bed. For the first time in months, I fell asleep easily, and I slept through the night. The next morning, I found a notebook on the kitchen table new with a red leather cover. There was a note on top in Mom's handwriting, in case you need a fresh start. But the old one is pretty great too. Mom, I picked up the notebook and ran my fingers over the smooth cover. I would keep using the old one, I decided. It held too much history to abandon. But this new one could be for something else. Maybe letters to my future self. Maybe poetry. Maybe just random thoughts that didn't fit anywhere else. Or maybe eventually I would start writing my own observations about the people I loved. About Mom. About our relationship. About how we navigated the complicated terrain of being family. Maybe, someday far in the future, I would have a daughter of my own. And I would write about her the way Mom had written about me, with love and fear and hope and honesty. But that was a long way off. For now, I had college applications to finish, therapy to start, and a relationship with my mother to rebuild. I made coffee and carried a cup upstairs to Mom's room. She was still in bed, reading glasses perched on her nose, one of her old diaries open in her lap. "Which year?" I asked, handing her the coffee. "You at age 8. You were obsessed with dinosaurs. I have 3 pages here about the time you corrected your teacher on the difference between the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods." I laughed. I was insufferable. "You were passionate. There's a difference." She patted the bed beside her. "Want to read some?" I hesitated for only a moment before climbing onto the bed next to her. She angled the diary so we could both see, and we read together, her memories of my 8-year-old self bringing both of us to laughter and tears. It would take time to fully rebuild the trust that had been broken. There would be difficult conversations ahead, moments of anger and hurt that we'd have to work through. But sitting there on her bed, reading her words, watching her face as she remembered, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. We would figure this out, Mom and I. We would learn to be honest with each other, to trust each other with our vulnerabilities, to stop protecting each other so fiercely that we ended up alone. We would write our own story, one that included both privacy and connection, independence and intimacy, separate diaries and shared understanding. And maybe in the end, that would be enough.